The Wilhelm Gustloff, the single largest maritime loss of life that most people have never even heard of. But for those that have heard of it, a debate has raged through the decades. Today, we are going to discuss, was her sinking justified, or did the Soviets commit yet another war crime in one of the war crimiest wars in human history? Hi, I'm great because of boats. You're great because of boats. Humanity is great because of boats. And sometimes we make our cool boats even cooler by putting giant guns on them and doing sometimes interesting, sometimes horrifying, and sometimes downright weird things with them. I'm here to tell you about them and probably get yelled at in the comments over it. But discussion is fun, history is fun, and history of boats is my superpower. So let's embrace naval puns and dive in. The Wilhelm Gustloff was a cruise ship built in 1936 for the Third Reich, but her career as a moderately luxurious cruise ship would be short-lived as she would be requisitioned by the Kriegsmarine on September 1st, 1939. The same day Germany decided that what Europe really needed was another land war to consume the entire continent. If at first you don't succeed, do it again but worse, I guess. Anyway, from September 1939 to November 1940, she would serve as a hospital ship, until the British naval blockade made an unarmed surface ship kind of unnecessary, and she was refitted into a floating barracks in Gdynia, Poland. There she sat for the next 4 years, housing recruits to the 2nd Submarine Training Division. But since sequels never offer anything new, this Second World War did not go Germany's way, and by late 1944, the Germans are in a full retreat from the east with a revenge-thirsty Soviet army nipping at their heels. In order to facilitate and help speed up this mass exodus, the Kriegsmarine decided to use some of the requisitioned cruise ships. So in January 1945, the Wilhelm Gustloff was armed with AA guns and set sail to take retreating Germans from East Prussia back to the fatherland. An estimated 1,400 military personnel, comprising the ship's crew, the 2nd Submarine Training Division, a Women's Kriegsmarine Auxiliary Detachment, and some 9,000 civilians were on board, for a total of around 10,500 souls. What happens next has led to some fierce debate amongst my fellow maritime nerds, because on January 30th at around 9 p.m., three torpedoes from the Soviet sub S-13 under the command of Captain Alexander Marinesco struck the port side of Wilhelm Gustloff and immediately disabled all power and communication to the vessel. Water immediately rushed in through the new massive portholes in her bow and amidship, and 40 minutes later the Wilhelm Gustloff had disappeared beneath the waves, taking at her best educated guess nearly 9,500 souls, ranging in age from 9 months to 80 years. So the million-dollar question is this: was a ship carrying a vast majority of civilian passengers retreating from a war a valid military target? Or did the Soviets commit the largest maritime atrocity to ever happen? To answer this question, you have to look at the rules of war and accepted naval practices of the time. See, in the early to mid-19th century, few laws about war actually existed. They were mostly gentlemen's agreements to not do shady shit to each other while actively trying to end each other. Weird, I know. That changed with the Hague Conventions of 1899 and 1907. Specifically for our discussion, the important bits were the laws governing hospital ships, civilian ships, and crucially military transports. These laws laid out in pretty much no uncertain terms that hospital ships and legitimate civilian crafts were verboten to attack, while belligerents would be able to board these ships to examine and confirm that they indeed did not serve a proactive military purpose. The crews and passengers were to remain unharmed, could not be captured, and may keep any sidearms on their person. And when it came to hospital ships, while not completely ratified until the Second Geneva Convention, they were to be clearly identified as such. Usually this meant painted white with a massive red cross on the side and sometimes a green stripe. Think the RMS Britannic after she was converted to HMHS Britannic. And although this restriction has relaxed in modern times, under no circumstances was a hospital or civilian ship, personal or merchant, to carry any type of ship-based guns. No turrets, no machine gun emplacements, no anti-air batteries. Military transports, however, are a valid military target, armed or not. In fact, any ship serving any type of military purpose other than the care of wounded troops is a valid military target. And here is where we come to the part that is perhaps the most important. What is not in these treaties or agreements that most people are completely unaware of and, in my experience, shocked to learn. There is no law, no treaty, no agreement on land or sea that says you cannot attack retreating military personnel, even if they are unarmed. I'll give you a second to take that in. Okay, now I'm sure some of you screamed what or something that rhymes with full dip, but it's true. A retreating soldier, that is one who is not clearly surrendering, is not hors de combat or out of combat. They are still capable of regrouping, rearming, and returning to the front line. Once an individual has commenced to combat, they are classified as a combatant until they surrender, they die, or they're demobilized. And combatants are always a valid military target. People like to confuse the laws of war with their own morality, and they forget a key fact. War, while sometimes necessary, is never moral. You may take a moral high ground with your principles and your war goal, but at the end of the day, one soldier is trying to end the life of another, and there is no morality in that, just what is unfortunately necessary sometimes. So back to our million-dollar question. Was a ship carrying a vast majority of civilian passengers retreating from a war a valid military target, or did the Soviets commit the largest maritime atrocity to ever happen? And the answer to both of these questions is yes. Wilhelm Gustloff was not marked as a hospital ship. She was carrying retreating soldiers, and she was visibly armed with anti-air guns. She was a valid military target, and her sinking was justified. However, it wasn't unknown to the Soviets that she and other cruise ships were being used to evacuate German civilians from occupied lands. The Soviets, however, also knew that they weren't used only for civilians. And now it's a moral question and not a legal one. I personally think the largest maritime loss of life in human history is a legally justified action, although a morally reprehensible one. And that's war, a sometimes necessary, but always morally gray evil. If you stayed this long, I greatly appreciate you. I won't beg you for the normal YouTube things, but please go check out Ocean Liner Designs, Drakenafel, History Buffs, and Alternate History Hub on YouTube. They're my biggest influences and heroes, and while I'm high effort, low quality, they're high effort, high quality. I'm currently working on a series about the Battle of the Denmark Strait I'm hoping to have up by the end of the month, and I'm open to any other naval stories you want to hear about. I wish you all fair seas and calm winds.